All right. We're about halfway through with the Deuteronomy. I think we should be able to finish it up today. We're up and running. If you're cold, I'm hot. I turned the air conditioner on. I took my coat off so that I can be cooler. And if I get cold, I'll turn the air conditioner. I already turned it up a little bit, so it should shut off. Well, Starla bought a car, so we're glad about that. So she's driving a car. She's moving up in the world. And I don't know if I told her the story of my family. My first car was a Chevelle. I wanted the GTO, the goat. It was a 65 goat. My dad said it's got a bad clutch in it, but I couldn't drive a stick. It had a Hurst four-speed on the floor. Now you got to be a certain age to appreciate all this stuff. And back then, I mean, and you that are my kids or younger, you don't know what we're talking about. I think the cool thing was they would drive a car around like that in one group. They would be bopping around. The thing was to hit the clutch, throw it in reverse while you're moving. Well, when you're a kid and you're cool, wow. And then you let the clutch out.
Without breaking the gears.
Oh no. Then you spend the next week tearing the tranny apart, and then you replace the gears, and then you do the same thing over until you finally wise up and figure that isn't so much fun. What thrill is there in anything? You could say that about anything. What's the thrill in that? Good question. So one of our men, he loaned out his car, his first car, and you don't understand what these cars were like. You could sit 4 people across if you were small on these bench seats. Four across.
Whole family.
The whole family. And you get 8 people in there. And then there was a deck on the back seat. Remember, there was a deck back there that went over part of the trunk.
They used to sleep there.
And my brother slept there on the way home. He would sleep there on the way home from Sandusky. And now, you guys go riding out there on Harper Road and Cochran Road out in Solon. Yeah. And I think we all know where that is. Well, they would take these cars out there, and it was farmland then. And if it's farmland, what kind of a road is it?
Dirt.
Well, no, it wasn't. It was paved. It was this. It followed the topography of the land. You know, it followed the land. Well, you don't have that anymore. It's one big flat. You can land a plane there. You can land a Boeing 707 there. It's just flat today because they take all the hills out. You could always tell an older road because it's hilly like that. And so the thrill was to go hilltopping.
Oh yeah.
So you go out there and you do a Beretta. I mean, it's actually, it's what was that program with the red Rebel Charger? Oh, the Dukes of Hazzard.
Yeah. So
you're airborne. You're doing these airborne things. Well, the farmers didn't like it. There were farmers out there at that time. And folks, that's not even 5 minutes away. And so he loaned out his car and they're hilltopping, and the farmers wanted to put a stop to it. The brick went through the front window, through the windshield. And it missed the 2 guys. It went right through the middle. The brick ended up on the deck of the back of the car. Do you know how fast you got to be going? It ended up on the deck. The police were called. Nobody confessed. They never pressed charges because who threw the brick? But they wanted to get these kids to stop doing that. And it was just a bunch of tobacco-chewing farmers out there with their pitchforks and a brick. And one of our men, do you know it's legal to park across the street here? Unless there's signs posted now. Are there signs posted across the street? Would you park your car across the street here, on the street? Jim parked his truck in front of the church one time on a Wednesday evening prayer, and he got creamed. It smashed that before it smashed our building. And that totally was smashed. He parked a Bonneville. One of our men drove a Bonneville. Do you remember what a 65 Bonneville looked like?
Tank.
A tank. It was as big as a boat. And a semi made a delivery. He did a U-turn. He turned the truck around. He took the whole car out. He went over the entire back end of the Bonneville and squished it. He kept going. They did get the truck driver. And the car had to be towed. I mean, he couldn't drive it. And so, car stories. Well, when my sisters brought home their first car, these are the things you want to avoid. She bought a Mustang, and it was a yellow Mustang. It's probably a 65 or 66. She was as proud as a peacock. She gets it home. She's waxing the car. This is day one. She just gets it home. She's waxing the car. If you remember those cars, she broke the antenna off. Well, what happened to my sister? She started bawling her eyeballs out. She was so upset after the wax job. Us kids were around teasing her. She couldn't even get the car in the garage. It was this way, that way. She couldn't get the car into the garage. That ended up in tears. And then we were told to kind of vacate so that Dad could help her get the car in. But I didn't want any of that to happen for Starla on her first car.
You could have offered her a coat hanger for the antenna.
Well, we didn't. I don't know how that got repaired. And then my older sister, when she brought her car home, it was a 63 or 4 Corvair Monza, beautiful car, convertible. A friend of mine and myself and my father and my sister, we picked up the car. We were all in the convertible driving home, but my father drove his own car. He went straight home thinking we went straight home. So we convinced my sister, let's go for a ride through the park on the way home. Well, my dad got home. He thought that we were hijacked. We either got in an accident, the mafia got us, the UFOs pulled us out. He didn't know what happened to us. He was so angry. We got home, he was screaming and yelling. This is day one of bringing the car home. Screaming, I mean top of his lungs. My friend realized he heard his mother calling, so he went home. He got out of there. And then we went to my room, and my father was screaming and yelling, telling my sister and me off. And he would always say if he hit the word, a word that was started with a "k" like that, it would get under his teeth. Well, his teeth, the whole set came flying out and started bouncing on the carpet. And we're looking. Well, needless to say, he stopped yelling. We all started laughing, and it was over. But I didn't want to have any big incident like that. My dad would do that in the boat. We were out in Lake Erie, a mile out in a rowboat. And he would be screaming and yelling at me. His teeth flew out. He was so glad they didn't go overboard. They went right into the mini bucket. He had to fish them out of there and stick them back in. Anyway, Deuteronomy, car stories. Oh my goodness, we had some wild car stories. You don't want to have any wild car stories.
But you're going to have one whether you like it or not.
We're gonna have some stories for the sermon. They're not car stories, but man, we got some crazy car stories. Yeah, but you don't want to have those. You want to do things the right way, always the right way. All right, Deuteronomy. We left off number 11, that Jesus used Deuteronomy in dealing with the devil. Now, and we looked up all those verses last week. We looked them up, and that's what he used in his defense. And then what did the devil use against our Lord? Anybody recall one of his attacks? He used what? He also used the Bible. And it was a psalm about the angel about dashing your foot against a stone and all. trying to justify his having him leap from off of the temple. By the way, how will that come true? We said that everything the devil tempted the Lord with, all that's going to come true. He's going to rule the earth. The reaper will be right behind the planter in the millennial. In other words, bread's going to be made just that fast. That's how fast it's going to be growing. How will it be that Jesus jumps off the temple and doesn't get hurt? How is that coming true, coming up?
When he comes back.
When he comes back, every eye shall see him. In other words, falling from the sky. Exactly. So all of those things that the devil tempted him with are all going to come true. Now, he's not leaping off the temple, off the pinnacle. They're coming true that every eye shall see him. It's all going to come true. It's just out of time and out of place. It's a future date. Jesus said, well, no, not, but just, he didn't say to the devil, not now. It's all going to come true, but not now. All right?
He'll split the Mount of Olives when he lands, and CNN won't broadcast it.
And CNN won't broadcast it. Yeah. All right. Circumcision in the heart. Deuteronomy 30. Turn there. Folks, it's all about the heart condition. Boy, another time that happened to us. My brother and I we were dropped off at the barber. There were two barbers in town, barbershops in the middle of town. Man, you haven't seen a barbershop in years. Barbershop in the middle of town, they had chairs and all. And we both got a haircut, and he said, when you're done, just start hoofing it home. Well, we're Father Abraham, we're hoofing it home. It's about 3 miles to the house, so we're hoofing it back to the house, and my dad takes off work to pick us up. Well, in the meantime, my next door neighbor was driving home, the missus, and they drove a big Olds 98. And we had a 51 Mercury. And I remember we would get in that car, we would comment, man, it's like riding on a cloud. Because ours was a rattle trap. And she drove us home. My dad went looking in all the shops in Bedford. He didn't know what happened to us. Well, we were already at the house. And we weren't going to say to our neighbor, the neighbor lady, well, take a hike. She offered us a ride home, so we just got in the car. We didn't even think about it. We just got in the car. Man, he was mad that time too. He should, refrain from getting angry like that, man. My dad could really get angry. All right, Deuteronomy 30, verse 6. You know what? Learn from other people's mistakes, right? Learn from other people's mistakes. All right, and the Lord thy God will circumcise thine heart and the heart of thy seed. The fleshy part of the heart that needs to be cut off, such as for the Christian, it would be the killing of the old man and the enhancement of the new man, the circumcision of the heart, a change of heart. In the heart of thy seed to love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, with all that thou mayest live. By the way, the first 2 commandments, and to love thy neighbor as thyself, they're both in the Old Testament, folks. They're both in there, and there's the first one right there. All right, if you would turn to Colossians chapter 2. This shows up in the New Testament. Colossians 2. You ask why, Sonny asked, well, why do that with a car? Why do anything like that? Why do kids do anything? They're bored. They do weird stuff, man. Colossians 2:11, in whom also ye are circumcised with a circumcision made without hands, in putting off the body of the sins of the flesh by the circumcision of Christ. In other words, Christ is the one that comes along and does the circumcising of the flesh. And I know Ruckman teaches that you separate the soul from the body. And I'm not sure we want to go that far. But it's a change of heart, folks. And it's done by Jesus Christ, and only He can do it. And only He can do it. Philippians chapter 3, verse 3.
Changes your point of view.
He sure can. Amen. For we are the circumcision which worship God in the Spirit. It's done by the Holy Spirit of God. Rejoice in Christ Jesus and have no confidence in the flesh. All right, we don't go the way of the flesh anymore. The old nature, it needs to die, and we follow the new nature. All right, let's turn now to Romans chapter 2, verse 29. And by the way, are anybody here cold? Are we getting cold? Are we getting cold? No? Anybody cold? Don't be afraid. You're not going to hurt my feelings. Amy's cold. Okay, Nathan, take that button there and just, the air conditioner's on, just move it up a little bit. That'll shut it off. Sonny, will you take that air conditioner, just move the bottom knob up a little bit. 2:29. But he is a Jew which is one inwardly. This is Romans 2, verse 29. It's a part of the inside, and circumcision is that of the heart, in the spirit, and not in the letter, whose praise is not of men, but of God. So the circumcision that takes place in the heart, it became an outward thing in circumcision. The circumcision of the flesh, and it wasn't a change of heart. They just it was just the standard, the sign of circumcision that was given those children on the 8th day, according to the law. All right, circumcision in the heart. All right, now look at this list here. Deuteronomy, we said last week or the week before, maybe it was last week. It takes place in 1 month's time. Let's see, the amount of time is given, in Deuteronomy 1:3, on point number 4. It takes place over a period of 30 days, 1 month's time, and it's an oral giving of the law, the second giving of the law. And he goes over all these laws. And obviously, we are to be obedient to that. So the words that, now some of these lessons that we do, I do this with some of these words. And I get these lists by reading other people that make comments and have researched all this over the years. Obedient is used twice in the book. Obey, 10 times. Do, it's a matter of doing these things, 93 times. Hearken, listen to it, and hearken unto the word, 20 times. The heart, you want to do it from the heart, that's 46 times. Keep the law, keep it, 39 times. Observe the law. All meaning similar things. It occurs 21 times. 21 times. All right. Deuteronomy 11. Now, some of these chapters, I hope that you can or will eventually memorize this. And a lot of it is done strictly by repetition. The land of Egypt is what kind of a land? The topography of that land? It's flat. Okay, so you walk how? You walk by what? You walk by sight. In school, I remember how did they grow crops there? If it's like a desert there. Yeah, irrigate. And what would they irrigate? What was the water supply? The Nile. And so they made these irrigation ditches, and you couldn't go too far. I mean, as far as they could dig back then. Nowadays, you could probably really get some trenchers out there and irrigate that a long way. I remember when we were first go out west, I think we went in like 1964 was the first trip out west. You would hit Iowa, the western section of Iowa, you would begin into Nebraska and, or not the Dakotas, I think it's Nebraska, and not as far south as Kansas. Kansas is really dry. And it might still be a little green. The further west you would go, it would get, what would it be like? As far as the land is concerned. Pardon? No, it's flatter than a pancake. Not until you hit the foothills, until the mountains. It's flatter than a pancake. It's brown. It's desert. It's arid. Then if you go in 1965, it seems like another 10 miles, it's a little more green. You go in 66, another 10 miles, it's a little more green. In other words, they kept irrigating more and more and more and making use of the land. It seems that's what I would remember. My father said, well, he would travel that during World War II as a salesman and representing Faywick Airflex and going out on, not so much on sales, but for business. And he said, when we go out west, I want you kids to see what kind of a weed? Tumbleweed. And if you watch a Western, right, John Wayne, Gary Cooper, you see the I think it's fake tumbleweeds today. They probably have plastic ones. It's fake tumbleweeds. Well, he wanted us to see the tumbleweed. By the time we got out there in 1964, was there any tumbleweed? Well, he would see it in the 1940s. Well, 20 years later, the tumbleweeds are all gone. In other words, it becomes more and more scarce because of irrigation, because of the farmers getting rid of that. What was one of the biggest towns out there? Animal towns. What kind of an animal? And you wouldn't dare take your horse in there. And it was for hundreds of, I think a couple 100 miles. Pardon? No, not buffalo. You wouldn't take your horse in there. You don't want to have your horse step in there. Prairie dogs. There was a prairie dog town. I think it's a couple 100 miles long. And so cowboys would take their horses. You would go around that because the moment they step in those holes, they step in a hole, what happens to the horse? They break their leg, and then what do you do with the horse? You shoot the horse. And if you shot your horse, and you got to get someplace, well, over the years, the prairie dog town got smaller and smaller and smaller because prairie dogs taste
like chicken.
Like chicken. They taste good. And so they taste good, I'm pretty sure, and as it became more cultivated, and they wanted to get rid of them, so it got smaller and smaller and smaller until they almost became rare. And so you'd go out west to see a prairie dog, to go see. There's like a little community of prairie dogs, but it's not 200 miles. What was one of the biggest swamps in the United States? We'll say 1800, still around 1800. And where was it located? Where do you think of a swamp? And where? What state? Oh, Florida. Louisiana, Florida, but that wasn't where it was. Utah. No. Boy, that's a good guess, but you're not even close.
Washington, D.C.
I'm pretty sure it's on the border. Yeah. It's in Washington, D.C. today. It's on the border of Indiana and Illinois. And we have a video of it. It's the Limberlost. And what's the title of the video? The girl of the Limberlost. If you get your clicker out and you log on to Limberlost, I'm pretty sure it's one of the biggest swamps in the United States. It was enormous swamp. And eventually over the years that shrunk because they filled it in, cultivated it, chopped the trees down, and so on. It's the Limberlost. It's an enormous swamp. Anyway, in Deuteronomy 11, to offset this Egypt, which is you walk by sight, that's the old way you and I walk. The new way that you and I walk is by faith. Because if you drive through the mountains and you go over the mountain, what is the next thing that you see? Anybody know what you see? If you're in the mountains, you go over the mountain, what's the next thing you see? Anybody know?
Your mother-in-law.
Yeah. No, you see another mountain. You go over that mountain, and what do you see? Another mountain. It's like there's no end to it. You go over that mountain, because they're always looking for the pass to get through this mess. And it's not your mother-in-law. But you go over the mountain, you just see another mountain. So you walk by faith and not by sight. And if there's hills like that, you cannot irrigate it. Now, they do irrigate on certain topographies. And if you're traveling out west, it almost appears as though the water that's irrigated is going uphill. But it actually is going downhill. They'll put it on the side of hills, and they make these irrigation ditches go around hills. Not in mountains, but in lower areas. Verses 10 through 17 of Deuteronomy 11, for the land whither thou goest in to possess it is not as the land of Egypt, from whence ye came out, where thou sowedest thy seed, waterest with thy foot, is a garden of herbs. But the land whither ye go to possess it is a land of hills and valleys, and drinketh water of the rain of heaven. You got to wait till it rains to get water. And it's hills and valleys. So the idea is that we have to trust and obey the difference between the old nature and the new nature. We walk by faith when we're in this new land. All right, Deuteronomy chapter 6. We'll just pick out a good chapter. Verse 7. About the law, thou shalt teach them diligently unto thy children, and thou shalt talk of them when thou sittest in thine house, when thou walkest by the way, and when thou liest down, and when thou risest up. All right, so that today, do parents do that? Any parent. Do parents do that? What are they busy doing? What are parents busy doing today? What are they mainly looking at? Well, they're working. You know what? Parents are busy working, trying to keep their head above water. Just trying to pay the bills. I heard these statistics the other day. I think 40% of the people in the United States right now have only enough money to pay their next rent. I think they said they don't even have $400 in the bank. They don't know where the next, they go, we lived probably 35 years paycheck to paycheck. It was, when we don't get paid by our customers, I would call the wife up and I'd say, you know that cupboard where all the food is, right? She said, yeah. Well, I said, you better go look in there. Dig deeper. So she would dig deeper, and we had some of the best meals we ever had. She would dig in there and she would prepare supper because of the and so the next week would come, I had no money. I said, you know that cupboard? Dig a little deeper. And we would clean out the cupboards like that, and so on, and use the food up, because there was no food. Deuteronomy 6, verse 7 there is, teach the law to your children. You're supposed to put it on the doorpost, verse 10 through 17. Shall be when the Lord thy God shall have brought thee into the land which he sware unto thy fathers, to Abraham, to Isaac, to Jacob, to give thee great and goodly cities, which thou buildest not, houses full of all good things, which thou fillest not. It's kind of like it's like going into the millennium. or going into heaven. I mean, a mansion prepared for us that we did not build, and so on. Through verse 12. But if we don't obey, we're not going to have those. The problem here. Houses full, verse 11, houses full of all good things, which thou fillest not, and wells dig, which thou diggest not, vineyards and olive trees, which thou plantest not, when thou shalt have eaten and be full. Here it is, verse 12. Then beware lest thou forget the Lord, which brought thee forth out of the land of Egypt from the house of bondage. When you end up, we'll say, making it, and Americans want to make it how? By making money when they make it. And they have enough money to get by without the Lord anymore. What happens? They forget the Lord. They forget the Lord. I don't need him anymore. I don't need him anymore. Isn't that just too bad? But you see, it's true. That was written in 1451 BC. All right. The death of Moses is Deuteronomy 34. Deuteronomy 34. I have written next to that Jude 9. What happens in Jude 9? The book of Jude, the book before Revelation, Jude 9, verse 9. There's only 25 verses in Jude. There's only one chapter. What's in verse 9? They what? It was, yeah, it's Michael and the devil have a dispute about the body of Moses as to where it is buried. By the way, give me some good reasons why we don't know where Moses is buried. We know where he's buried, but we don't know the exact place. Why is it we don't have the body of Moses? Give me some good reasons. Say that again?
Jews probably lifted up.
They would have it just like the Catholics have saints. You can go visit the body of saints, and all it is skeletal remains in a coffin. You go on tour in Europe, and you see these places, these relics.
They're buried in the floor of the churches when we were over there.
And they're buried in the floor of churches. And who? Popes? I mean, Catholic saints, or are we talking about like John Knox?
I assume it's Catholic saints.
But I think it's true about like John Knox, or they bury him in the floor of a church. It's covered over with a stone. They'll go and worship those things. They actually go and worship those things. And so some of the famous, when we were in the Mennonite church, when you go overseas, what kind of a tour do you go on? When you go overseas, a religious tour. Where do most people go? They go to the Holy Land. They go to the church of the this and the church of that, and where the grave is, and where Jesus was baptized, and they go to the Holy Land to see that. Where does a Mennonite go? And I was kind of shocked. We were kind of. I thought I knew everything. I didn't know nothing. And it was Norma Jean. Norma Jean just got back from a tour of Europe. Anybody know where they went? Where she went? On a tour, a religious tour. Anybody want to guess? It was more than Germany, though. Germany, France. But what were they visiting?
The martyrs.
The martyrs. Yeah. Where they would get burned at the stake. Yeah, these sites of martyrs. That was the tour. Is going to the saints of the sites of where they were burned at the stake and so on. Yeah, that was kind of different. Isn't that a little different? All right, we're not going to read the chapter 34. It's a lonely death. He gets to see the promised land, but not go in to the promised land because he smoked the rock twice when he was supposed to speak to the rock. So it's a death with a vision. Death in divine embrace. Probably preachers think of these things. Died by the kiss of God. And he's, by the way, God buried him. Who buried Moses? God buried Moses. And no one knows where it is. We know on the mount where it is. Jesus Christ, it's an epiphany of Jesus Christ. He physically shows up. He's the one that ate with the elders, the 70 elders, on a mountain. It's literally Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ dug the hole, put him in. So he puts him in. That's the only way to explain it. Verse 7, and Moses was 120 years old when he died. His eye was not dim, nor his natural force abated. So it's a picture of the law dying out, and when Joshua comes in the next book, it's a picture of grace, meaning Jesus Christ coming in. A picture of the law dying out, and a picture when Joshua shows up, because he takes over, a picture of grace coming in, Jesus Christ coming in. That's what it's a picture of. Picture of Jesus getting ready to cross into the promised land. Joshua means Jesus, means the same. All right, let's look at a couple of these verses. Psalm 13, verse 3. Psalm 13, verse 3. Consider and hear, O Lord my God, lighten mine eyes, lest I sleep the sleep of death. So it's the sleep of death. By the way, Psalm 2 says, kiss the Lord, lest he be angry with thee. Kiss the Lord, lest he be angry with thee. So that's a type of salvation. Kissing the Lord is a type of salvation. But who kissed the Lord and went to hell, man? Judas did. 1 Corinthians, nothing else from the Old Testament. 1 Corinthians 15. 1 Corinthians 15. Let's take these that are single verses. Luke 8, just for sake of time. 8, verse 52. All wept and bewailed her and said, Weep not, she is not dead, but sleepeth. All right, these are going to be verses about sleeping. 1 Thessalonians 4:13, about the rapture there, and that is about the saints that are sleeping. Matthew 9:24 and Mark 5:39 is probably when he says, She doth but sleep. And they laughed him to scorn. And when Jesus looks, and little children do that, you go to a funeral parlor, and they, grandma's there, and she looks and appears as though she's what? If they do a good job on her, and it looks pretty natural, it looks like she's sleeping. In fact, I've seen people, I look and I say, I swear they were breathing. It almost looks like they were breathing. I always look for that in a movie, by the way. If they get shot or they're laying there, I always look and I say, well, see, he's still breathing. You can still see him still breathing. All right, so it's a picture of the law dying out and Jesus' grace coming in. Now, to wrap this up, so all these are about a person sleeping. Let's go back here. Deuteronomy, these are some that I added years ago. Go to Deuteronomy 1, verse 37. Deuteronomy 1, verse 37. Okay, this is the verse dealing, there's a bunch of these verses. Also the Lord, verse 37, I didn't include this in this lesson. Also the Lord was angry with me for your sake, saying, Thou shalt not go in thither. And so it appears in Deuteronomy 3, Numbers 20, Numbers 27, Deuteronomy 31, and Deuteronomy 4. You got a bunch of verses saying that Moses, you're not going in. And then he keeps praying to the Lord. And then the Lord finally says, don't bother me about this anymore. You're not going in. He says, don't bother me anymore. Look at verse 39. Deuteronomy 1, verse 39. These are just some interesting points. Moreover, your little ones, which he said should be a prey, and your children, which in that day had no knowledge between good and evil, they shall go in thither, and unto them will I give it, and they shall possess it. Okay, so they're the ones that go in. The babies go in. That would be under 20 years of age. Boy, there's another verse about the clothing. And I don't have that right here. What happened to their clothing in Deuteronomy? What does it say about that? It waxed what? Waxed meaning it grew. It waxed not. Anybody know? Old. Is that what you said? It waxed not old. So your clothes didn't get old. You didn't need a seamstress. You didn't need needle and thread. It didn't wax old. Now, just for an interesting thought, well, let's say you got a couple babies here. If the babies go in and their clothes didn't wax old, her clothes never wore out. Well, did she grow? And did she get bigger? Did Ella get bigger? Well, I always say, well, if the baby grew and they never changed their clothes, well, the bonnet grew, the baby clothes grew, their little shoes grew, everything grew with them. If it didn't wax old and they didn't need new clothes, it's just an interesting thing for thought. It makes it kind of interesting. You don't know how that worked out. All right, now Deuteronomy 2:14, and we'll close here today. Deuteronomy 2:14, in the space in which we came from Kadesh Barnea until we were come over the brook Zered was 38 years. So the point is, they're 38 years wandering around like this. And they make the statements, 38 years, until all the generation of the men of war were wasted out from among the hosts. In other words, they were 2 years in the land, in the wilderness, at Mount Zion first, just sitting there waiting for further instructions. They then go into the land of Canaan, come back with the evil report, and he says, you're going to wander around here for 40 years. Well, they already spent 2 years doing that at Mount Zion, at Zion. And then an additional 38 years they wandered around. They wandered around when it was an 11-day journey to get there. And we compare that then, none of these numbers, they all have a meaning. At the pool of Bethesda, the impotent man was there for 38 years. It's a picture of Israel being in the wilderness at these 38 years that are recorded here in Deuteronomy 2:14. At the pool of Bethesda, John 5:5, he was there for 38 years. And that all those things, they have meanings to them. And I can honestly say, all the churches we have ever been in, we were 10 years in the Roman Catholic Church. I was 3 years at the Presbyterian Church. We were 1.5 years at the Mennonite Church. And it wasn't until we got into a fundamental independent Baptist church that we learned anything. Anything. We would never have learned anything like that. And what it probably means is that the pastor doesn't know himself. He doesn't know it to be able to teach it. To be able to teach it. Father, bless now the preaching and follow. In Christ's name, amen. Preaching in 15.